Duara, 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 kepera.
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 Om Amurapta.
Om Amurapata.
Om Amurapta.
Om Amurapata.
Om Amurapta.
Om Amurapata.
Om Amurapta.
Om Amurapata.
Net net duanet sefekera senues.
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 Om hetep hetep hetep.
Om hetep hetep hetep.
Hetep. Greetings to you all. We're here for the long-awaited journey to Egypt slide presentation. This is we're trying to get to do this since the first trip, and so many things have impinged on that. Many actually a couple of books have been born since the first trip. Actually, the first trip inspired the Goddess CD of last year, the Goddess Net, the one that you just heard, the Net Neduanet, and all the other, the Yamut Ur song, as well as the Akuasha. Excuse me? Yeah, and Dad played on one of the songs on that CD that you heard, the piano. And so that was the trip was, and the Kemetic dye was born with that trip. This is one of the most fruitful trips, and the other trips have brought out so many other things that hopefully you have benefited from. It has augmented the teaching, and going to Egypt is, as I was saying before, it should be a spiritual pilgrimage. Although most people go there as a vacation, they go to awe and feel awe about this ancient civilization that somehow existed, and it's a mystery about it, and we don't know what it's all about, and except the scholars, and they know have all the answers, and but it's a pity how the world is no better for it, all the answers that they have, and their own lives are not enriched by it, except that they have a wonderful hobby to engage in, and they can always have a good topic of conversation at cocktail parties. Oh, on our last excavation to Egypt, we saw this and we found that, and we have all the knowledge and we know all the histories and so on and so forth. And this doesn't just happen with ancient Egypt. It happens with India. It happens with other civilizations in Africa and in Europe. And when this happens, anything other than the intellectual information about a culture is lost. And then it takes, of course, spiritual philosophers to bring it back and to see what is there. What I'm going to try to do for you today is to give you an impression of what it would be like to go to Egypt, what the kind of things that you would see and experience. But there is of course, no way to. That'd be like trying to say, well, I'm going to give you some ice cream, some vanilla ice cream, and then I'm going to ask you to explain to someone else what that tastes like. You can tell them all kinds of things, but they have to go and they have to taste it. You have to give them some so they can taste it too, and then you can both say, "Aha! Now I understand what you were saying to me." And hopefully, when you get a chance to go, you'll say that, "Aha!" These are the things that the teacher was trying to say. And why should you go? Before we get started, why should you go? Why should you make this pilgrimage? That's what it is, a spiritual pilgrimage. Why not just stay here and study with the books? We have about 30 books on ancient Egyptian culture and history and philosophy. What do you need to go to the trip for? And technically speaking, in absolute terms, you don't have to go. In order to attain spiritual enlightenment, you don't have to go to Egypt. You don't have to go to India. You don't have to go anywhere. If it was the case that you have to go, then imagine how many people in the world would go to hell because they can't go to Egypt to attain enlightenment. In fact, spiritual enlightenment comes from understanding the teaching, not from going to any pilgrimage centers or going to any special geography places with special vibrations or any such thing. That's ignorance. However, going to Egypt will augment. It's the same thing. You don't have to study the spiritual philosophy by coming down to Miami to attend the Goddess program, right? You could continue. But how do you feel now having come here about your understanding about the teaching? Yeah. And you still have a little bit to go, but now you can see perhaps a way. You're seeing through the fog now of your own ignorance. And the same thing. Going to Egypt augments your understanding. It augments your feeling. And puts you, but this is one of the keys. You can't just go alone. You have to have a guide. And that guide does not have to be with you personally, but you have to be well instructed in your understanding of what you will be confronted with, of what you will see when you do go. So what I'm getting at is that you have to go either with a spiritual guide, or you have to be initiated as well as advanced on the path of spirituality for you to make sense of what you will see in a proper way. Always, or otherwise, you will find a situation where you will miss out on what you will see. You'll get the surface impression, and that will not help you, as it does not help many people. Thousands of people, you had that, you got my thought. Thousands of people go to Egypt every year. In fact, millions of people go to Egypt every year, which the Egyptian government is very happy about. And they are not benefited from their trip. They continue to be egoistic. They continue to follow the path of disease, of anxiety, worry, adversity. And who are they benefiting? Once again, the story of Sa. Who are they benefiting? They're benefiting Mr. Mubarak, who's the president of Egypt. Are they benefiting themselves? You spend a lot of money to go there, and you should make it worth your while, and it is worth the while. Even from a person at my level, but if you're well prepared, it's like going home. Otherwise, it's like a toil, like going to a place to visit and being troubled, because a lot of things you meet there, if we have a chance to talk about that, they'll trouble you because of the culture that is there now. But you're not going for that culture. You're not going for the Arabs, and you're not going for whatever it is that they're doing there now. You're going for something else. And this is how you need to go with that attitude. You're going for the spiritual culture, which is still there, which is still palpable. You can still feel it. And that's the magic of architecture. And which we try to, in a small way, recreate here by the images that you see, and in the way of doing things, and the ritual that we perform, and so on and so forth. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with our journey to Egypt. We have a lot of slides to see, and because there's so much there. Actually, there's so much that is not in the slide presentation, because that would have to be for another day. At many of the sites, we could spend just one day just going through the slides for that particular site and exploring that at length, and that is not possible. So we're trying to give an overview, especially for those of you who may choose to participate with us on the trip that we're planning, or that we're hopefully going to be planning for next year, or for this year, it's 2001, or if you go on your own. So you can be well prepared, so you can get an idea of what it's going to be like. Okay? This is a book, Egyptian Yoga. I'm not going to talk about it too much. This is primarily a book on philosophy. And now we're going to explore a little bit about where that philosophy comes from. Not the scriptures, but rather the culture, the history, the geography in the world. Because I don't want you to be like those people that they have, if you watch the Tonight Show, Jay Leno, every once in a while he interviews people, and he asks them, do you know where Indiana is? Is that in South America? Do you know where New York is? Isn't that in China? Where's that in Europe?
No, it's like, do you know where maybe like Buffalo, New York is?
Buffalo, New York. No, but they do give questions like that, very totally way off. And these are college students sometimes too. And you wonder. These are the people who are going to be in government, managing your life, and they don't even know, the geography of their own country. But they ask them, who do you know the name of the president? I knew that. I heard it the other day. You don't want that. Egypt is located in the northeastern corner of the continent of Africa. And we're going straight there. I hope you know where Africa is. And we're going to the northeastern corner of that continent. And we're going to the Nile Valley. This is what is called the Nile Valley. Nile Valley was produced by the Nile River. It is cut into the land. It is the lifeblood of the country. You can see here.
Do you have it?
I think it's in the bag, the same video bag. The Nile Valley is cut into the land by the Nile River. It comes from the south, deep in the heart of Ethiopia, from the highlands, the mountains, and then it runs downhill, all the way down into the Mediterranean Sea. It runs downhill and it runs north. And that's why the southern part of Egypt is called Upper Egypt. And that's why the northern part is called Lower Egypt. I have a similar situation here in Florida, those of you who know the geography of Florida. The Everglades are actually a river that comes out of the Lake Okeechobee, which is the middle of the state. It runs downhill, runs south into the Gulf, or you want to consider it the Atlantic. And this area is a marshy area, just like the Everglades in a sense, in a way. And there's a lot of farming that goes on there, and they went on in ancient times. As you come into the country, you can stop in one of two places. You can stop up here on the very tip, which is the city of Alexandria, which we're not going to have time to explore today. And we don't need to, because we're going for ancient Egypt. We're not going for the late Egypt, later period Egypt. Egypt of the Greeks. For those of you who follow the history, or study the history. During the Greek period. You can go to Alexandria, you can stop in Cairo. Cairo is the main Arab city that has developed out of the ancient Egyptian metropolis that was there before, which is otherwise known as Heliopolis. Heliopolis is the Greek name of the city Anu, the city of Ra, And I don't have any pictures to show you of Anu because everything is gone. Except for one obelisk that they have, which I didn't get a picture of it. Can you imagine a city like Miami being gone? And in its place, what is there in Heliopolis is a modern suburb of Egypt where rich people live. But in ancient times, when Arab culture began to move into Egypt, our culture is not native to Egypt. The Arabs that are living there are not natives to Egypt. They moved in there from the Middle East around 600, 700 ACE, after Christ, or after the Common Era. When they moved in here, they began to dismantle the stones and to use them to make houses for themselves. Those houses and those structures have been since torn down, and they have major complexes, major tenants, and houses and buildings and so on and so forth. Modern, it's very modern. Something that you might not expect. And like I say, the rich people of the country live in that area. Rich people like any other place in any other part of the world. Mercedes and BMWs, the whole 9 yards. So Egypt, it may seem like a backward place, but in the major cities they have internet and they have everything the conveniences that you need. But also they have a mercantile culture that is very, very adverse to tourists and to mod in general. And perhaps we'll have a few minutes to go over that. Well, you're going there, be prepared. Be prepared to not relax your wallet. Because sometimes you want to go on vacation, you relax, and I always want to be hang, and you just want to, and they're just like vultures ready to take you. Anyway, let's move on, because that's not our area for today. We have time later on. So, the northern part, and this is the dividing point, is right in the middle of the ancient land of Egypt, not the modern boundaries, but the ancient boundaries. This is where Akhenaten set up his new city, Aten in the horizon. He specifically chose that, obviously, because it's right in the middle of the country. I've taken pictures. I tried to take some pictures from the very first time I went, because I want to give you the impression as a newcomer to the land. So that's what you're going to get, hopefully, today, as someone who's just coming in there. Cairo, and this is what you're confronted with as you come in. You don't go to the tombs. You don't see the glory of Egypt. You see pollution. You see modern metropolis. Those of you who are in New York, you have an idea of what Cairo is like. Only worse, because there's more people. It's like 15 million or 16, 17 million people in this area, and no pollution controls on the cars. And this is what you see in the early morning. And they love to blow their horns. So don't get a hotel that's right under a major road. Don't do that if you want to sleep in the morning. And if you want to meditate, which you will want to do, it'll be a distraction. And usually the first thing that people go to do is to see the Sphinx. This is probably the most spectacular monument that is still left standing in Egypt, and for so many reasons. It's the most ancient monument in the world, period. Those of you who study with me, you know, or you've read elsewhere, you know that the archaeologists have shown, geologists have shown that the water damage, you can see here, we'll see some close-up pictures in just a minute, has shown the Sphinx to be at least 7 to 10, well, 12,000 years old, coming from our period today. The pyramids behind it are later developments, but still they're older than the dynastic period that we are aware of, that most people are made aware of. They are not from the dynastic period. That has been shown also. Those of you who've been attending the Origins of Egyptian Yoga series will know that 10 years ago, and this is not public knowledge, but this is available to people who do the research. 10 years ago, there were carbon dating tests on organic materials that were found inside the pyramid, in between the stones, and that shows that they were not from the dynastic period. There was culture and civilization before the dynastic period. Dynastic period means that there was a unification and a empire formed, and that was the first dynasty. There was civilization before that, and culture before that. And of course, that means philosophy, art, architecture, and yogic science.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but also, I guess a couple of things that I became aware of with respect to the Sphinx was one about the fact that it used to be covered over, except for the head. So for a long time, and that's why it's also kind of remained undisturbed for a long time and preserved as well underneath the sand, because they never really thought that there was anything that big or monumental could be underneath, just seeing the little head sticking out. They thought that was the only thing. And also they say they do not keep the sand away from it. They do not keep the area cleared out. Like within 20 years, it would all be covered over again.
That's correct. And I didn't mention to you, as we were coming up to this, that I showed you the fog before, the smog. This is not smog, what you're seeing here now. This is a sandstorm. On my first trip, it was a sandstorm, and I was worried about my cameras, that the sand's so fine it gets into everything. And so you can imagine, this is the pit where the Sphinx is, and that fills up. That's what fills up within 20 years. In fact, the city of Rome was under 20 feet of rubble until the modern archaeologists went back to look at it in the 1800s, I think, or a little earlier than that. So you can imagine what is still there that has not been discovered. Is estimates are that perhaps 80% of Egypt has not been discovered yet. However, what we have is the essence of it. We have the primary aspects of it, thanks to the tombs records as well as the papyruses and many other aspects that you have already learned about that we're going to see here also. This is part of the sandstorm again. People are huddling together. And this is a trip in March. You see people, see what they're wearing? Yep, it gets cold in Egypt. And it's a desert, but it gets cold in the wintertime. Especially during the sandstorm periods as well as at night. It can go down to the 40s. Which is a big surprise. So you can be ready for that.
Should we buy coach here or there?
You don't want to buy anything there if you can possibly avoid it.
Unless it's a very good bargain, then yeah, you have to know the art.
Yeah, it takes a lot of mental energy. Now, this is the picture, looking at the Sphinx from the outside. This is actually the Sphinx temple. These stones were cut out of the enclosure where the Sphinx was. All this area, this is where these stones come from. You're going to see it a little better now. Turning up back, we walk back and we walk around this way into the main entrance to where the Sphinx is accessed. And here they have you going in through what they call a valley temple. The valley temple is associated with the central pyramid. is where special rituals would have been performed. And then there's another temple at the top of the hill that we're going to walk up to with the slides that you're going to see. With a procession, remember the procession that we did Sunday night? You can imagine the kind of procession that would have been going on there. Hundreds of people. This temple, you can see the architecture here is very different from the architecture of other temples. They're very square. The stones are very, the pillars are very square. And that is something that you see in the older period temples. And what I'm leading you to understand is that Egypt, Kemet, the Black Land, has a dynastic period and a pre-dynastic period also. And the architecture changed slightly, but the motifs and the teaching remain the same. We're going to see that when we look at the head of the Sphinx closely. And this is when we're trying to scurry around and trying to find spots where not too many people are, because this is very difficult, especially in March. This is like high season, and to try to find. But it's good actually for at least for you to see one person, so you can see in relation to the size of a human being what the monuments are like. Each of these stones, I believe these are something like 50 tons, and they would have had other heavier stones that they were sitting on top that have been since taken away, like as I say, used for other purposes. Remember we talked this weekend about the goddess Net, the goddess Selket, the goddess Aset, and the goddess Nebuchadnezzar, how they guard the shrine. This is from the tomb. These are things that you can see if you go to the Cairo Museum. Especially if you have a day that the weather's not so good. Especially on that day also, it rained. And that was unusual for Egypt also. Remember I told you that it rained? We got like a little spray. It's like when you take a little spray bottle, a little water bottle, and you spray it. It was a little bit like that, only like a light mist. And they said it was that was the only day of the year that it rained. That's what I was told when I was there. Which is kind of nice. This is Selket, this is Aset, and the other two would be on the other side. And the goddesses guard by opening their arms and embracing. So this is the tomb of King Tut. All the figures that you see here in the shrine that we have, they're replicas from the tomb of King Tut. This is Anpu, or Anubis, who is guarding the shrine. This shrine holds the organs, the intestines, the lungs, the stomach, and so on. These, and we have a replica here also of this, this shrine that Anpu is guarding. He's actually sitting on top of it, guarding the cover of it. That's where the bones of Asar will be placed. And this is where you get the teaching of the Christian, or the Jewish rather, Ark of the Covenant. And look at the Christian Yoga book for more details on that. This is from the Cairo Museum. When you go there, you can see lots of treasures like this one. This is from the very old period. You can see the artistry in the development of the eyes, and you can go closely, you can see how they've used special stones to mimic the iris of the eye and so on and so forth. This, you see here the color of the lady and the color of the man, brownish red, and this is basically a white color. You should not be fooled, as most people are, or as by their own misgivings, their own racism, or the guys that go there with them, that tell you these stories that they have been given to tell people. Ancient Egyptians were a multicultural group, mostly brown, and especially at the early period, very, very dark, like the Nubians of the south. I think there may be one or two pictures of them there. This painting of the man, a brownish red, and the woman, a yellow or white, is a mythological, a mystical practice. These colors are known to, and this is why you have the crown of Upper Egypt is red, and the crown of Lower Egypt is white. These colors are mystically, they complement each other. There is a mystical symbolism about them, that they complement each other, and this is why this is used. Another important thing about this, you see the name of the lady. It means, this terminology means surrect. It means that she is a royalty. This particular symbol right here means royalty. And rect means knower or a wise person. And here, this symbol of the squiggly line means N, and this is an F. The horned viper, the mouth means R, and this symbol means T, and this means the lady. Nefert. Because we have the symbol of Nefer, that which is beautiful. But this terminology here that we want to look at very quickly, it means surrek, as we said, royalty and wise. And this is the term that is used for people who are counselors to the kings and queens. Here we have a situation where a woman is in a position of, like this Madeleine Albright. She's a counselor to President Clinton. You have a similar situation here. And no time since have you seen this kind of situation in history. And here you have it, we're at the beginning of culture and civilization in the world. You have women being in a position of power, in a position of authority, unlike any other civilization.
But in that one, if I recall, the little card that I read actually said that it was the man that was in that position. And so it was only because he was able to read it that he realized, he said, no, wait a second, that's not what it says. It's not the man who's in a position of power. It clearly says here in the books that it's the female that they're referring to. So again, that's why it's important for you to know more than just read it in the little cards and for you to be able to know. And that's one of the things that a lot of, if you start doing research and you start reading a lot of the books, you may find a lot of what actually is in the Egyptian yoga books. You may find a lot of the stories and all of these things. But what one has been able to do is to actually take it and put the correct and proper interpretation on it that it was intended in the first place. So it's not just a story or not just information out there about this long lost civilization that has no meaning for one's life, to bring it back and make it mystical again. And so that's something you have to be able to have insight into, and I think having even done your study so far, that you've gotten insight into that, so you'll be, because if you listen to the guides, if you even over here, did you have a picture of Minna at all? Min?
No.
If you even overhear what they're saying.
Well, actually, maybe.
About it. For example, we were in one of the temples.
Yeah. Okay.
We were in one of the temples. It was the very towards the end. Oh, it was when you were back in Luxor, right? It was in the Luxor temple.
It's a Karnak.
It was a Karnak temple? Okay, so we're in the Karnak temple, and there's a picture of Minna on the wall, and there's this Arab guy, and he's with an African-American couple. And so there's a picture of Min. So I walk by and I hear him tell him, oh, so he's the one that is really hot, right? Because, Min has the erect penis. Oh, yeah, so if you're trying, he's a fertility god. So, right, if you're trying to get somebody and you're really hot, and this is the conversation that's going on. He's the one that you want to worship. This is the conversation that's going on. Okay. So you really have to have your own insight into it. And a lot of the other stories, if you overhear what they're telling the people, what they're being said, and you can easily become caught up in listening to what they're saying, because they mix. It's not that everything they're saying is false. They do have some historicity about it, and they do have some dates, and they do have certain information that is good, that you may not even know from having studied the books, because they go to school actually to become guides, and they study all of these things, and they want to give you information that they know will make you, feel good, and that you're getting all of this information. So some of it what they say, but then they throw in all of these other things that are very, throughout it to kind of make it not real, to make it lesser of lesser value, because at the end of one tour, and that really shows like where they are, you go to this papyrus museum and you go through this whole tour and they're showing you ancient Egypt and how beautiful and all these things, and then the very end, you know where they take you? To a room where they tell you that it's an Arab museum. The very end of the tour, you end up in an Arab, right? And basically, and this one sign they show you is that we are not killers, we are not murderers. That we have to fight to protect ourselves, and therefore one, and that does not make one. And it's like, well, why am I here? Why are we here? And you have to go through and tour the whole museum. So basically, they feel that, and then you asked the question, right?
This is getting to a lot of other. This will be like for part 2. You should, like for a serious orientation to going to Egypt.
We'll leave the suspense hanging about the question.
So if you're having a bad weather day, bad quote unquote site, go to the museum, Cairo Museum, excellent collection of items. Only that it's like the King Tut tomb when they found it. Everything's like thrown in, and you kind of have to go exploring. Yes, you can, and they'll charge you to take pictures. And if you want to take a video, they'll charge you a lot more.
And they will check your purses, so don't think you're coming. They open up everything, and you gotta.
And they have there's a little bit of paranoia between, and there's the high security, and they're afraid of terrorism, because there are fundamentalists who don't like the commercialization of the country. They don't care about ancient Egypt. They don't want people making money off of anything. They just want to live by Islam, what they believe is Islam, and they would like to do away with the whole thing. So we should at least thank the commercialized people for that they are supporting and keeping, the monuments to the extent that they are.
And in that capacity, you kind of don't mind paying for the charges also, just in that capacity.
Some places don't let you take pictures because they say that the flash will deteriorate.
Yeah, they say that the flash deteriorates, but you go to the Louvre Museum in France, and they don't care. Or you go to the British Museum, why don't they care?
And also, if you pay enough, they don't care.
It's because if you take good pictures, then you don't have to buy the books with pictures. Okay. And you get to go there and discover gems like this. Those of you who have been studying with me for a while, you must know what this is by now. This is the symbol of Sema. And who are these characters? And what do they represent? The higher and the lower self. This is the Simatawi. And who has exposed this for what it is? Next, now we're going to leave the north and we're going to go to the south. There are a few things to see here, but we're going to see them at the end. A few other things to see here in the north. What we want to do is to go where there's some good weather, so we can get some good pictures and good slides, and then we'll come back at the end of our trip to have a second impression. Because when you go to Cairo and you're thrust into that big city and the people running back and forth and all the bustle and all the action, all the noise, it's not a good spiritual impression that you get. But it's good to go. I think it's good to go first time. So it shocks you a little bit, and then when you get to the rest of the country, then you go to heaven, and then you can deal with what's in Cairo in a better way. So now we're going south. We're going to Wazet. We were in Heliopolis in Anu. Now we're going to go to Wazet, the city of Amun, and the two main temples there are the Karnak and Luxor temple. The other major important sites there are the tombs of the nobles and the tombs of the kings and queens. That's where Nefertari's tomb is, Ramses, Tutankhamun. About 80% of what is left, or what has been discovered of Egypt, is in this area. So we're going to go through very fast, but there's so much that it takes you at least a good 4 days to be there and to see everything that is to see. And if you're an athlete, you can do it in a couple of days. But you'll be running from morning till day. This is the row of sphinxes. We have 2 sphinxes out here. This is a row of sphinxes. This is part of what used to be 2 miles of sphinxes between 2 miles. 2 miles of sphinxes. On both sides, facing each other, going to the entrance of the temple. This is the Luxor temple. If you go back the other way, the row of sphinxes leads you to the Karnak temple that we're going to see afterwards. What would happen is that there would be a procession once a year where Amun would be brought out and would be carried in procession. The whole city would come out to witness this, because God is coming out, going to the temple. And then the divinity would sail back to his original temple. And we don't have time to go into all the ritual and all the meaning behind it, but suffices to say that it was part of the metaphysics of running the world. This, move on. I took some pictures, so I want you to get the impression of moving in towards the facade of the temple, towards the pylons of the temple. And once again, I got it on a good time when there are not too many people there. So can you get an impression of what it's like to do the procession, to do the ritual move? The entrance of the temple is over here, and it is recommended that you close your eyes and don't look towards the right, and walk. Remember how I took you? I held your hand and your eyes were closed until we went all the way to the end, and then we're walking through. This is how you should view the temple. This is one of the obelisks that are left there now. There was a second one here. I believe these were placed there by Ramses II. I think he did some of the major works on this particular area of the temple. Here you would have had 4 flags for the divinities. And the statues you're going to see here are massive colossi statues. You can see how they are in comparison to the people. These obelisks are 300 or 400 tons. And look at the size in comparison to the people. These are not the largest ones. The pylons, you know what that means. Asada Nebethet, entering into moving towards the open court. Of course, this would be the area where the general population would be allowed. Inside the temple, you have different grades of initiates that would have been allowed. This is inside the temple now. This is what is called the peristyle hall, this area here. These columns are in the perimeter of the court. That's what called peristyle hall. This is like a transverse hall. And these again are massive. They are just wonderful to be just standing close to them. The top of them are open flower, either lotus or papyrus or palm trees. These are closed. And they have different mystical implications, reference to the opening and closing of the heart, opening and closing of the consciousness. This is where we came from. These are the pylons that we came from behind there. I should tell you that I believe it was a couple of 100 years ago, some Arabs got together and they built a mosque right on top of the first court of the temple of Luxor. Egyptologists have been trying to get them to move it since they discovered the temple, but they have been reluctant to do so. They say it's sacred ground. And, of course, we know it's sacred ground. Recently, you go to the Luxor Museum, and there was some restoration work done, and they discovered underneath these slabs there were some statues and some different items, and so there are always new things being discovered. However, you should know that these discoveries do not affect the teaching, they do not affect the philosophy that is known, they actually support the history, they actually support many aspects of what is known already. Now this is going back towards where we came in. Actually, this slide should have been before the one that you just saw. This is the first open court. This is where the mosque is. In this area here is here. Looking back the other way now. This is the transverse hall where you go walk back. And these massive, colossal statues, they're mostly of Ramses. He was the most powerful ruler at the time. He's the one who invested most of the money to create the temple, this part of the temple. And you can see how it is in comparison to the size of the people. These statues, once again, 200 or 300 tons. Now we're moving towards Karnak. Remember I told you the row of sphinxes, where it goes 2 miles to the next temple? These sphinxes have ram heads because they're dedicated to Amun. Amun's animal symbol, his zoomorphic symbol, is the ram. And that relates to, of course, the symbol of the zodiac that was in accordance with the cosmic time when Amun was being worshipped. These are the pylons, and you see the multitude of people who are going in, and this I believe and the Aset temple are 2 of the most popular temples, and they have a constant stream of people. There's no restriction on how long you can stay at these, and that's one of the benefits. Some of the temples are in the outlying areas, and there are lots of restrictions because the police are very nervous about tourists being killed, and so they're very protective, and which is a good thing. Although it hinders those who want to do research. This entrance where we're coming in here is where the divinity, after going to the Luxor temple, would have been brought back up the Nile, and right here in front of where the gentleman is standing, there was a dock. There's dock is not there anymore. The Nile would have come right to here, to the entrance of the temple, and then the shrine would have been carried. You're going to see the picture of the boat, the divine boat, carried back into the inner shrine, which is all the way at the back of the temple here. Is a close-up of the ram-headed sphinxes. What we have here outside are the human-headed sphinxes. It's a statue. Ramses with one of his daughters. And this is the statue is right over here on the left. This is as you continue walking in. This is the inner shrine right here. This is an obelisk, one of the obelisks of, I believe this one is from Thutmosis, which is really Jehuti Mes, which means the son of Jehuti. And on the left side, I don't think I have a picture of it in this particular program, there's the great obelisk of Hatshepsut, which is huge. It's like 700 or 800 tons. And they were in the process of making one that was over 1,000 tons that cracked, apparently, and they never finished it. They called it the unfinished obelisk. But we're walking in here from this open court. Now we're moving in to the second pylons into the area that's called the hypostyle hall. Hypostyle hall. You must know that temples are they're made to mirror the world. We talked about that over the weekend. They basically have 3 sections symbolizing the Trinity of creation, but also they're symbolizing the land of Egypt. as well as the creation. And the creation, the primeval hill, is the inner shrine. That primeval hill is the highest point of as if a mountain. And that, remember, where God created the world, where God didn't have a place to stand on, he had to create a piece of land to stand on. Created the primeval hill. And that's where Ptah sits. Ptah sits, or Amun, or Ra, they all sit on that. This area where these people are walking is lower in elevation than the hill. That's how all the temples are made. You're actually walking, you may not notice it, but you're actually going up. And these are plants, in actuality. They are made to mimic the papyrus swamps or the forest, where you have lots of trees, lots of plants, and then you're coming out of the wilderness up to the top of the hill as you proceed, as you make the procession. And these are, as you walk in further, this is just spectacular. Just being there to take in the massiveness of these columns, and the inscriptions on them. And these are incised into the stone, anywhere from 1 to 3 inches. I'm not sure these particular ones. The ones that we saw in the Medet Abu temple, those were like 6-8 inches. And here we continue moving further towards the inner shrine, and you can see there's a multitude of people. You can't really see them here.